and welcome to the Ed Show at MMS. I'm Simon Perryman. I'm joined today by my guest Daniel, and we're going to be talking about DevOps, or Developer Operations Integration. But Daniel, first, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Simon. I'm Daniele Muscetta. I work as a program manager in the Operations Manager team, specifically focusing on the application performance monitoring scenarios and developer and operations collaboration and integration.
Great. Well, let's talk a little bit about DevOps. First of all, what exactly is it? How do you define DevOps?
Well, there's many ways that the industry and people in the industry define it. Essentially, to me, it boils down to when you have a development team and an operations team, those people ultimately are working together to make the business successful. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, they have sometimes different ways of doing things and also different goals, because operations typically wants to restore functionality of a system after a failure has occurred as quickly as possible, whereas at the same time, typically the development would like to understand why the issue has occurred in the first place and investigate deeper. So sometimes these different attitudes in solving a problem can create some tensions, and we want to give tools that allow these two different teams to collaborate and work more together towards a common goal, which is the one of keeping those applications running at all times for the business.
Okay, so let me get this straight. So you have the developers, they're the ones that build the application. Then you have the operations team, which is our IT professionals, our infrastructure guys.
Yes.
They're the ones that have to run it.
Yes.
So really we're talking about this collaboration, this entire application life cycle.
Yes.
Build the app, get it running, and then I guess maintain it's kind of this next step, right?
and troubleshoot whenever something isn't working right, and even optimize it and bring the feedback back from operations into the development cycle so that we can learn from previous incidents and implement fixes and optimizations in the code, so that the application runs smoother in the future and so forth. But to do this, we need to give the right information to the right people and allow them to share them, with the artifact that they're comfortable with. The developers typically live in Visual Studio, at least the Microsoft developers, and the operation folks might be using our System Center tools. Each one might not be completely at ease using the others' typical tools.
I mean, as an IT pro, code scares me, right? I want to avoid that. I don't want to have to go into Visual Studio and, look at all those details, right?
Yes, at the same time, a developer might not want to come to your operational tool to see
they will
if the
scare
application
him, right?
in production. But he wants to know what's happening in production. He's interested in the data itself, is just not familiar with the tool. So we built integration that allows you to take alerts in Operations Manager and forward them to Team Foundation Server. Team Foundation Server being part of Visual Studio team system that is a source code repository and is a system that allows you to do to track work items such as bugs or features that need to be added to a product, to a development project. So those alerts coming from the operations world can be forwarded into the developer's familiar tools, so that without leaving those, they can consume this information and do the right things to improve the application.
Great. Now, is DevOps for everyone? Will every business be able to take advantage of this?
So there's a few features that are definitely useful for everyone, because when you have implemented application performance monitoring in System Center, you will get information such as the average response time from your pages, for example, which is useful in general. Anyhow, it will be a lot more valuable for those people who have a development team in the house and an operations team that collaborate together, that they own those applications.
So if they're actually writing the code for the applications.
Because if Operations Manager can tell you which line of code has failed, it is only useful when you can actually fix that line of code. If you don't own that code, it's a little bit less useful. Nevertheless, you can still gather kind of numerical metrics on key performance indicators.
So for example, if there's a problem with Exchange Server, you don't own the code for Exchange Server, you're probably not going to really take
You probably want
to
have a different escalation procedure to eventually, if if you deem it's an operational thing you can fix, you fix it, you reboot, you change the configuration of your network. Or if you think it's a code bug and it needs to go back to us, you contact Microsoft support in the case, right? But it's a different escalation than sending it to your own developer who needs to see like the exception look like in production on his application when real customers were using it.
Okay, that makes sense. So tell me, what are the main DevOps features that we have in System Center 2012?
So, of course, everything starts with the .NET Application Performance Monitoring.
APM.
Which is the APM feature, which we have been talking about for a couple of years now. And we have kept enhancing this to not just produce those alerts that tell you the line of code in the operation tools, but to convert those events, for example, into IntelliTrace format. IntelliTrace is a Visual Studio artifact. It's a file format that allows you to see the state of the application and essentially debug it without touching the real production machine. So you can capture this trace from the system in production when something bad happens, or even when something good happens for that matter. And through this file, with the source code, the developer is able to step through the instructions just like if he was on his
like a debug machine.
Exactly like is an experience that's totally like debugging, but separated from the production environment. So the developer can still see what the application is doing in production without actually touching the production machine, which is awesome. And so we convert this APM information into IntelliTrace, and we allow you to forward those alerts to the Foundation system as a work item, as a developer work item, when something requires their intervention.
So how granular is APM? I mean, does it go down to a specific function, down to a specific line of code? How detailed can it get?
It can tell you down to the line of code which is deemed to be slow or throwing an error.
And I mean, is that customizable? Can you set a timing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There is a lot of knobs and configuration options that we have that allow you to specify different thresholds for different parts of your code, different components or tiers of a distributed application. So that maybe you want to be alerted from the front end and not by the back end, or vice versa. You want to have different definition of what you consider slow. Maybe I have some background processing which tends to be slow and is not too much of an issue. I want to have a very responsive front end and I set a lower threshold there. Or I want to collect more parameters for a specific piece of code. Or I can obfuscate some parameters for a specific piece of code in case maybe they contain sensitive information. So there's a lot of configuration opportunities there to tune it to your needs.
Now, you said when you capture this information, we can then go and send it to TFS. Just tell me more about what's that end-to-end process. So we see an alert, something goes past a threshold, and then is that automatic? Is that a manual process to go and assign it to someone?
You can certainly make it automatic if you wish so. In the basic functionality, by default, we don't do it automatically if you don't want that, but we allow you to take an alert and change the resolution state in what we call assign to engineering.
Okay.
And this special state gets picked up by the connector, and a corresponding work item gets created in the Foundation server. Then if the developer requires more information, he can furtherly change the state to awaiting evidence, where he requests operation to please collect that additional trace for him. And so they can keep bidirectional synchronization between these two items.
Now, beyond APM, what other DevOps features do we have?
Well, you've probably also seen that today in the keynote and has been announced previously. We have this Global Service Monitor. Global Service Monitoring is an Azure service which Microsoft runs, and you can essentially connect your operations manager, your system center, on-premises infrastructure to this cloud service and make use of it. What it does, it runs synthetic transaction tests that in Operations Manager we were running from your own premises, from your own agents in the past, but now it allows you to pick points of presence we have in different data centers across the planet and run those tests from those geographical locations, so I can see how my public-facing site is doing from Australia or Japan or North America.
All the different Azure data centers we have, right?
Essentially. And the interesting thing in this is that I don't have, as an operation person, to write that test, because most likely my developers might have already written that test in Visual Studio, and Global Service Monitor is able to take the file that comes from the developers that they use for their own testing, and I can upload it into Global Service Monitor, and it will run that test for me in production.
Wow, so you can actually kind of customize what tests you're actually running from all the different
Yes.
places around the world. So I guess that's great. You know, we see a lot of developers that just have a single location, right? They're based in Moscow, but they don't know how their applications
Yeah,
work
and
from
maybe-
Brazil, other places like that, right? Great.
And maybe there's some other part of the globe that's having troubles accessing or is having a different experience, and it's
So then they can kind of get a worldwide view of how
Yes.
their application is performing.
Correct.
Great. Are there any other features, or do you want to show us these in action?
okay.
So what are we looking at here? This is Operations
This
Manager,
is Operations Manager. This is what we call the 360-degree dashboard, essentially showing you different perspective of I've got two applications in this case, Dinner Now and Tailspin Toys. And I have different perspectives, such as the average response time of the application, whether it's available or not. And I see in this case, my application is available, it's working. It isn't performing greatly, though. Most of my response time is, between 8 and 10 seconds. Is really,
Now,
really
did you
kind
set a
of slow.
threshold for this?
Well, the response time itself, it's what it is. If
Okay.
it's 8 seconds, it tells me 8 seconds. What my threshold would affect is whether this 8 seconds is considered good or not.
Good or bad, okay.
Right, and so that ties into my service level agreement. In my case, I think that 8 seconds is low. I don't like it. I would like it to be faster than 5, I believe, the threshold I said. And so you can see at the bottom that you have these service level agreements that get tracked, and my performance is really not up to standard, so I would like it to be.
All right.
For example. And these perspectives come from the synthetic test on one side and from the APM feature instrumenting the application from within, and they get combined into this single pane of glass, from which you can also go and drill down into this summary dashboard that breaks the information more down and slowly starts from 10,000 feet and goes more in details. So it shows me the same response time for external tests, but from various features or from various locations that I'm running it, and all the components that are making up my application. It might be multiple tiers, multiple parts, distributed on multiple machines, and ultimately the alerts related to this application. And as you can see, I've got quite a few performance
A lot of
events
detailed
that
information here.
keep happening. And in this case, they tell me my machine today is kind of slow.
No problem. Now, let me jump in and ask a question. You mentioned synthetic transactions a few times. What exactly is a synthetic transaction?
Well, a synthetic transaction is essentially you can record, imagine visiting a website and recording the interaction you have with it.
So, like, click on this
You open
link,
the home
this
page
link,
and you
okay.
click on the login link, you put in your username and password, press enter, you go to another page and you access a specific feature. And you can track all these steps with the Visual Studio Web Test Recorder and even customize the way you pass parameters afterward. And this becomes a repeatable
Series of steps.
series of steps that the system can replay
Very nice.
and execute as test in production to see whether the application is really working end-to-end, performing a certain functionality.
Great.
And this is...
So is this an example of, is this an APM alert here
Yeah,
that we're looking
so
at?
I'm opening an APM, from an APM alert, the corresponding event. And it shows me down to, this is for the Dinner Now application, for example, and I can see that this whole call to this default page was taking almost 7 seconds, and it goes down and tells me that, hey, this page is actually doing calls to web services on the back end, each of one taking 3 seconds. And I can even look at the transaction end-to-end, so from this page and traverse to the back end.
Wow.
And go and see events in this. How the corresponding event in the transaction was looking on the other tier of the application. And from there I see that eventually this web service call does a SQL query. So of course, if you do have access to the code of this application, the operation people might not be able to fix the SQL query, but the developer can. And so being able to send this information to development, which is simply done by changing the resolution state here and marking it assigned to engineering. This is all that's needed for the connector to then, and of course clicking apply or OK, something like that. And this is all that's needed for the system to, in a couple of minutes, pick it up and send it across to the foundation server in the form of a work item, or the developer work item.
And that's also going to include all that detailed information down to the line of code, what type of tests we're on?
Yes. Yes. So, for example, now if I go to my other machine, here I'm a developer, here I'm looking at the work item that has been created in this way by forwarding an exception from the tailspin towing application. And the developer from here can go again and see how the exception looked like. So the application failed this way. You can even see the parameters. Because in his test, maybe this application wasn't failing. It was only failing in a specific case. Apparently, it's missing a tax rate from some country or from some location that the user is requesting. But what it's more powerful is this ability to export this information to IntelliTrace. And I can even have this done automatically and attached to the work item. I just haven't configured it in this case, so I'm doing it manually. And once he opens the IntelliTrace file in Visual Studio, he lands, because he's on his developer workstation and has access to the source code and the symbols, he has access to the specific point in the code that's failing, and so he can look at
wow, that's really
how
going to
the
streamline
parameters,
this process, though.
Yeah, so he's able to understand what was happening in production without touching the production machine, build a fix for it, give it again to operation for deployment, or even deploy it automatically depending on how their process works. And so speed the mean time to resolution of these types of incidents.
Well, I mean, that's going to be great. You know, not only will it fix problems faster, but that will help get better service uptime, keep the businesses online, and ultimately businesses make money when their services are online. So I think it's going to be a great solution for these customers that have this in-house application building.
Yes, and it really gives you a perspective of whether the issues you're facing are code-related or are operational. So some of them can be addressed by one of the persona, some of them can be addressed by the other, but important is to understand which is which.
It's no longer it's your fault, right? It's a slow network or it's bad code.
Now you can see whether it's one or the other and make the appropriate decision based on
So now when we blame the
information.
developers, we can be confident it's their fault, right?
Yes, and at the same time, when we see that we are getting a timeout, then maybe it's not the code, maybe it is our network. It's the same also for us. I mean, it's both ways.
We like to blame developers, though. It's okay.
Yeah, we like to have the right information to the right people at all times, so the good things can happen.
Very great. Well, that was a great demo. Thank you so much. Now, where can people go to learn more? You have a few sessions this week as well,
Yes.
right? And they'll be available on demand. What are they?
Of course. So tomorrow morning, so today there is a session. I don't do that, and a couple of colleagues do that. There is a session on global service monitoring, I think, as we are recording this, at the same time slot. Tomorrow morning, so Tuesday morning, there is a introduction to Operations Manager in general, so SP1, and some roadmap of what's coming later down the road. And after that, a panel discussion with multiple program managers from the Operations Manager team to have this feedback from people and collaborate with them. Then we have another session on Wednesday purely on this theme of DevOps and TFS, and we go a lot deeper there. We show full IntelliTrace collection and how to configure some of these things, how to set them up so that the customers are able to go back to their home environment and set this up, having learned how to do it. And on Thursday we have another session also that falls into the DevOps theme, which is about authoring management packs and some upcoming changes in the Azure management pack.
Very nice. So a lot of other sessions available on demand on Channel 9. And then where can people go to learn more? What other resources would you point people to?
Well, of course, Microsoft.com/System Center, and the Operations Manager team for this piece in particular, we have a blog on TechNet, so blog technet.com/mom team, mom being Microsoft Operations Manager, the old name of the product. We haven't renamed the blog, but people are used to it. And there's a lot of other resources in the community.
Excellent, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate the time. And again, if you want to learn more, make sure you check out our other sessions on Channel 9. With that, we're going to say goodbye. And thanks again, Daniel.
Thank you.